So, all right. Okay, so the idea is to come up with a set of framework docs. And based on the conversations that we had yesterday, what I identified were just a couple themes. And this is just my personal opinion, so don't feel free to object or feel free to add. But I taken the content of the talks, I said, okay, what can we further develop? Okay, what are some of the things that may be of interest for us as a community to continue to build upon? And so I identified 5 topics that we could noodle upon further. Now, it requires, at the very least, well, it requires somebody to champion it and run with it. And the most obvious candidate for doing that is the person who gave the briefing. If they're not here, then it kind of dies on the vine, which is why we ask people to stay for the entirety of the philosophy track. Yeah, but life is different, right? So if they're not here, then some of these are going to die in the vine just because there's not going to be somebody who champions it. But if you think it's pretty cool and you want to champion it, even though the primary speaker isn't here, then by all means, feel free to pick it up and rally a community to basically build on top of these topics, okay? So yesterday, we had Daniel from Farsight talk about DNS over HTTPS. And one of the things that I teed up was, is there something that helps us understand the limits of how much privacy we want to engineer before we start seeing diminishing returns or potentially negative returns? Is there something that, is there some sort of framework that helps us understand when we should stop trying to encrypt, for example, or stop trying to protect someone's privacy because at some level it's either going to create a false sense of assurance or it's not going to actually help the defenders do what they need to do while not really gaining much on the privacy end. What does that look like? And DNS over HTTPS was just one example, but are there other examples that we could potentially point to and understand whether or not there's some sort of spectrum that we can look at to understand what the limits are for how much privacy we need to engineer for, okay, or how much, what sort of mechanisms that we should consider implementing and when we should stop, if at all, okay? Does that make sense? Now, I don't think, I see Daniel here, right? So unless anyone's actually interested in running with this one's going to die on the vine. But that's the basic idea behind this one. Now, the other one was Maggie. I don't see Maggie here either. But the question that I had posed here was, is there a framework to understand when 2FA is actually appropriate based on the consumption or production model of the resources that you're trying to secure? So when we look at GitHub, and I use GitHub as an example, so there's 4 different states for GitHub. You can visit GitHub without logging in, and that's pretty much a read-only state. You can log in and maybe fork some repositories, but not really contribute anything. You can have your own repositories, and you may even have a corporate repository that you're in charge of. And these different tiers, I would argue, creates a creates different types of privileges that one would want to then secure. And the more privileges that you have, then the more you may want to actually do something like 2FA, or the more you may want to find ways to safeguard that privilege. So when we look at 2FA, we typically look at it as a all or none sort of thing. You either implement it or you don't. But is there something that's more graduated or more incremental where you can say whether you're forking a repo or you're owning a repo, there's something between those. Let's say there's something. If we look at 2FA again as an on or off thing, is there something like a 1.5 FA? Not if you get what I mean. Is there something that gives us something that's less of a that's more of an incremental step in between? Okay, and what does that framework look like? All right, those are 2 selections, and then a couple other topics that came up yesterday. Yes, I can hear you. All right. If someone can tell them to turn down the music over there, that'd be great too. Okay. So we also had Chandler give a briefing on what we can do with data and how we protect data. And I believe that the key concept there was around creating a set of frameworks or templates or design patterns that helps people who create data and applications basically build systems where data can start and remain as cattle and not turn into pets. So what is that? What does that look like? And can we come up with a set of guidelines that helps us do that? Someone got Michael over there? Okay, thanks. All right. Guillaume also had a talk. And by the way, so Chandler, Guillaume, thanks for being here. And Gotti, we know you'd be here anyway. But if you do find, by the way, Daniel or Maggie, let them know that there are topics that they can tee up and run with as a community here. Okay, so Guillaume had a great briefing on talking about circuit breakers, and I pivoted it slightly and talked about safety mechanisms. And is there a way we can define what these safety mechanisms might be for cybersecurity? And ultimately, it's a mechanism to help limit or stop damage. So is there such a framework that helps us define those things? And then Gotti's briefing around when is it acceptable to allow a cyber plague to persist? And if the premise here is that by trying to remove it, you strengthen the plague, then what are the conditions under which we choose not to remove the plague at all? Okay, so it's sort of like an antibiotics argument, but applied to cybersecurity. So those are 5 topics that I observed from yesterday. There's others that, of course, there's more topics that we talked about yesterday than just these 5. But that's the idea. The idea is to go through, think about what was presented, and then think about what can we build on top of what was presented to develop something that's more meaningful than just what was presented yesterday. Okay? Any questions? Can you guys hear me back there? Good. All right. That's all I care about. Okay. So I'm going to, on the Slack channel, I'll probably put these types of topics up for vote. And whoever wants to contribute to those working groups, go ahead, just thumbs up or do something that makes it very clear that that's something that you're interested in contributing to. If there's another topic or a theme that you would want to hit, then certainly suggest that. And we'll figure out a way to format the text so that it becomes clear. Maybe we'll pin it or star it or something like that so that people can start finding those easily and vote on them accordingly. Okay? All right. If there's no other questions, actually, before so one other topic that's probably going to come up as a result of today is a discussion about fake news. We had a talk from Rich yesterday. We're going to have 2 more essentially talking about similar concepts. So we'll see probably another theme emerge on that topic. Are there any other topics that I might have missed from yesterday that you think you would want to highlight? All right. Okay. Well, it's morning. I don't know what you guys drank last night. I didn't drink anything. That's why I'm awake.